Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am very excited about today's video because I think this is the video that we all have been waiting for. We are talking about the best eyeshadow palettes that I tried out in the year 2019. If you've been watching my channel this year, I'm sure you guys know of my great love for eyeshadow palettes, and I've tried out an embarrassing large number of them. And I decided to tackle this video in kind of a ranking style. One of you had left that in my comment section as a suggestion to do a ranking style video of all the palettes that I tried out this year. And I actually just saw Andrea Mattiliano upload her eyeshadow palette ranking video from the last year recently. I will link that one down below. But I loved how that video went. I thought this was a great idea. So that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be ranking for you guys the 20 eyeshadow palettes that I tried out in 2019. Now I actually did have a couple more than 20 palettes that I either tried out or added to my collection this year, but there are a few that I feel like I still haven't gotten to know very well. I haven't used them enough. I don't feel comfortable giving them a ranking yet, but all of these palettes that I'm mentioning are ones that I have tried out, and I have a good feeling for how I like them, how they fit into my collection, and how often I use them and want to reach for them. One more thing to keep in mind though, generally speaking, I like most of the eyeshadow palettes that I try. On occasion, there will be one that is just a complete dud when it comes to formula, but for the most part, I can make most eyeshadow palettes work for me, and I enjoy most of them as long as they aren't just terrible. So even the ones that are ranked in the 20th spot are palettes that I still enjoy and that I still would recommend. But of course, to give them a ranking, I thought about a couple of things. First off, how often do I actually reach for these palettes? Second was how often I find myself wanting to reach for these palettes. And the last thing, of course, was just any inconsistencies or things that might not really suit me when it comes to either formulas or color stories. Those are kind of what I thought about when I was doing the ranking. But we do have 20 palettes to talk about today, so I want to jump right into it. But before we do, a special welcome to any of you that are newer to my channel. I hope that you will consider subscribing, and of course hit that notification bell if you would like to be notified every time I upload a new video. So we have a lot to talk about. Let's go ahead and get into palette number 20. So for palette number 20, I'm kind of breaking the rules. I'm actually going to be mentioning two palettes, but they're both from the same brand, and these are both from Colourpop Beauty. So I actually really love these eyeshadows. I think the formula of these are fantastic, but there's a couple of reasons I decided to rank them in my last spot. The first reason being that I just don't reach for these very often. I'm not even quite sure why. I've had these for over 6 months. So I have two of these. This one right here is called their First Impressions palette. Obviously it's a very kind of purpley gray, cool toned palette. And then this one right here called Get Ready With Me, which I think is the cutest name in the world, is obviously a neutral brown. Again, I think these are really nice palettes. I think the setup and the color story of these are very nice. For some reason though, I feel like these feel to the touch kind of like a Maybelline palette would feel. But I think these are priced a little bit on the higher end. I want to say that if you buy these without any sort of sale at Sally Beauty Supply, they're around $15, which for some reason for the size of them, that just feels a little bit expensive to me. But I just couldn't rank these higher because I just haven't found myself reaching for them very often. And they're not the type of palettes that are inspiring and exciting for me to create eyeshadow looks with. I do love a good palette that gives me some variety and some options. I feel like these are just very basic, simple palettes. So if you are a basic, simple person when it comes to your eye makeup, you probably would really enjoy these. The formula is amazing. They just aren't ones that really inspire me. Coming in at the 19th spot is the e.l.f. The New Classics palette. Now, I think this is a great palette. I know a lot of people have talked a lot about this. I think the formula in this is one of e.l.f.'s best as far as there not being any dud formulas in here. I often find in some of their palettes that mix mattes and shimmers together, they usually have a couple of shades that are just chalky and don't work very well, but this one is really, really nice. You get good variety in here. You get a good range in here of light to dark. It's a very good basic palette, but again, I just have not reached for this one very much. I feel like I should reach for it more than I do, and there's a chance if I force myself to reach for this one, maybe if I put it in a Shop My Stash, maybe I would learn to love it a little bit more. It is a beautiful palette. If you are into very simple, neutral eye looks, I think this is a great one. The price is fantastic. I think $14 for this one is way better than $14 for one of these because you get a lot more variety in here. Let me go ahead and swatch a few of these. I love this shade right here, which is Platinum. It's kind of like a, I don't know, it's like a silvery green, which is so pretty. This green right here, let's swatch this kind of pink tone champagne. So you can see these are really, really beautiful shimmers. And then a couple of the mattes. Let's go ahead and swatch the black and this brown, this transition shade, and maybe this kind of pink tone right here. So really pretty, nice formula, very buildable, easy to work with. But again, I just don't reach for it all that often. Coming in at number 18 is this one right here. This is the It's My Pleasure palette from Colourpop. This is a beautiful palette. The formula inside here is fantastic. It's one of their colorful 9-pound palettes, and this one does not have a pressed glitter, which you guys know my thoughts on the pressed glitters. I'm not the biggest fan of those, but the reason I had to rank this one a little bit lower down on the list is this is definitely a very specific look. These palettes sort of box you into a corner of sticking with one color, which is not a bad thing. If you're going for that look, this is a great way to go for a kind of pinky purple toned eye. I've loved the eye looks that I've created with this one, but I find them all to look basically the same, and a pinky purple eye is not one that I reach for on a daily basis. So this is the type of palette that I feel like is very kind of mood based. I don't find myself wanting to reach for these types of colors for me personally on a regular basis. I do love a good monochromatic look. I think it's a very simple kind of fail-safe way to play with color, but I just don't find myself wanting to reach for this specific color story very often, which is why I had to put it a little bit lower down on the list. Coming in at number 17, surprisingly, is a Juvias Place palette, and this is the Juvias Place Saharan palette. I love all of my Juvias Place palettes. They are some of my favorite formulas ever, and I love their color stories. I think they're all very fun, very interesting, but the reason I had to rank this one a little bit lower was for a couple of things that I don't like about this palette. The number one thing being that I so wish that this color right here, which is a beautiful matte black, I wish it was a matte brown. I just don't use a matte black very often, and I find myself when I take the matte black away craving something deep for my outer corner. So I just feel like a rich brown would have gone a little bit better with this color story. I know that's just personal preference. I know there are a lot of people out there that a matte black is an essential shadow for them, so that might actually be a selling point for some people with this one. But for me, I just find myself craving something a little bit darker that's not a black. Other than that, I think this is a beautiful palette. If you are into kind of fall tones, a little bit of oranges and bronzes and rosy colors, and even this beautiful green right here, I think you would love this palette. I just wish that was a matte brown in here, and I don't find myself reaching for this one quite as much as my other palettes, especially my Juvias Place palette, so I wanted to put this one a little bit lower down on the list. So the next palette I want to mention, I'm going to break the rules again and mention two palettes because these are both from the same company and they are relatively new to me, which is part of the reason that they're ranked a little bit lower. But these are both palettes from Focallure Cosmetics. I did feature these in a somewhat recent favorites video, and I mentioned that these were sent to me by Focallure Cosmetics a couple of months ago, and I've been using these quite a bit since I got them. They're really nice shadows. I think the packaging is beautiful. I love the color setup, especially of this one right here, the Impressionism palette. This one is an all matte palette. I think it's meant to sort of mimic or sort of dupe the Natasha Denona, I think it's a Safari palette, but I love the color setup in here. It's very rich and very jewel toned, but it's also somewhat earthy and neutral while still giving you color variety. This is just a really fun one to play with. Let me just swatch a couple of these for you guys. We'll swatch this kind of burgundy here, also this kind of teal green right here, which is one of my favorite colors in this one, also this kind of orange color, and let's swatch this kind of yellowy orange. So there they are right there. Beautiful colors. I do find myself having to pair this with something else because I always love to put a shimmer on my lid, but that's why I want to mention this one too. I actually like the color setup of the Impressionism one a little bit better, but this one gives you a couple of shimmers, and I do love the shimmers inside here. So let me swatch some of these shimmers for you. These shimmers remind me a lot of the Colourpop Super Shock eyeshadow formula. They're somewhat almost creamy feeling. They have the tiniest bit of like a spongy consistency to them. So here they are right here. Let me go ahead and swatch those on the back of my hand. I think these are beautiful on the eyes. I find as long as I wear a primer underneath these eyeshadows, they last pretty well on me. These are definitely shadows that are not the quality of my Colourpop or my Juvias Place or some of my higher end shadows, but if you're willing to use a primer and work with them and build them a little bit, I think they're fantastic for the price. Now coming in at number 15 is this palette right here. This is the Sweet Talk palette by Colourpop. Now I actually really like this palette a lot. There are just two things specifically that I don't like about it, and I'm pretty sure you guys know what they are. It is these two pressed glitters right here. Now it's not even necessarily the fact that there are pressed glitters in here, but it's what could have been in here if the glitters were not in here. I just am not a fan, especially of Colourpop's pressed glitter formula. It's very chunky, it's very difficult to work with, it's very messy, and I just don't like this intense of a glitter on my eyes, especially on a daily basis. And once I take out these two shimmers right here, there's just not as much variety in this palette, and I can't help but feel like if this would have been a traditional shimmer or even a Super Shock formula with these two shades, this palette would have had a lot more variety and a lot more interest for me, and I just can't help but feel like every time I open this palette, a little bit annoyed with what this palette could have been for me personally. Now, I know that there are some people out there that are really into the glitters. I think glitter is a great way to get some extra sparkle and brightness to your eyes, but in person, it just doesn't really suit my makeup style. But besides that, I actually have another palette that kind of is in this sort of ethereal pastel kind of pink tone family that's going to be ranking much higher on my list that we'll get to in just a minute. But again, I really like this palette. I just think because of those two glitters, I have to bump it down several notches. Ranking in my number 14 spot is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Carly Bible palette. There are a lot of things that I really love about this palette. I've reviewed this very thoroughly and talked about it a lot on my channel, so I'm sorry for those of you that have heard this before, but there are just a couple of things specifically that just didn't work for me with this palette. The first one being this shade right here. This was surprisingly not a very good formula for me. It gave me a lot of glitter fallout, which is really interesting because it doesn't even look that glittery. Another thing again that bothered me with this one is the fact that these two shades right here on the eye look pretty much identical. So I just don't like the redundancy of those two shades. I feel like one of those should have been swapped out for something else to give it a little bit more variety, maybe even like a warm brown, because I love that you get a cool brown in here. Again, I think this is a really nice palette. I love the color story from them. I think it's a very different color story that would appeal to a lot of people and look good on a lot of people. And not just that, there are a couple of shades in here that are actually standouts to me, which I have a video coming up that will probably talk about that a little bit more specifically. But let me just go ahead and swatch a couple of these for you. I do really love this matte kind of strawberry shade down here. It's really beautiful. It looks like something would be very dupable, but it is a little bit different than the other matte reds I have in my collection. Also this gold right here. Again, a lot of the formulas in here are really nice. There's just a couple things about it that I just didn't absolutely love. I wasn't a huge fan of the look of the packaging, which is usually one of the things that really draws me in with Anastasia's eyeshadow palettes. Because of those few reasons, that's why it's coming in at number 14. Now coming in at number 13 is also from Anastasia Beverly Hills and is the Riviera palette. Now I actually really enjoyed this palette a lot more than I thought I would. Looking at this color story, this is definitely color that is outside of my comfort zone. There are a lot of colors in here that are not ones I'm super comfortable playing with. But when I did my 7 looks video with this earlier on in the year, I actually really fell in love with this palette. With the exception of this very bright pink right here, everything else in here I feel like is more wearable than you would think. I kind of feel like this pink really throws you off. When you look at this pink and then see this purple and then see the yellow above it, it makes the whole palette look a whole lot more bold and unwearable than it actually is. But that said, it is definitely not a neutral palette, and these are just not the shades that I gravitate towards on a daily basis. These are the shades I have to be in the right mood to really dip into this level of color. But I love the formula in this palette, and there are a couple of shades in here that are just absolute standouts for me, particularly these two blues right here. I love these blues. As someone that is afraid of blue eyeshadow, this is how you do a wearable blue eyeshadow. These look so stunning on the lids. They just have such a beautiful formula to them. They are so reflective, so beautiful, and they actually pair beautifully with each other. You do get some good neutrals in here as far as transitions in this matte brown right here, and I actually really love this white. I discovered using this palette how valuable it can be to have a really matte white eyeshadow in your collection, because it can take any other color that maybe is a little bit too dark or a little bit too bold, and it can transform it into something that is much more suitable and wearable for the average person that's maybe a little bit afraid of color. So I loved having that shade in here, and I actually wish that more eyeshadow palettes would use a matte white. It's just not a color that you see very often, but I think it's a really fun palette to have. I'm happy to have this in my collection, and when I'm in the mood, this is one I do like to pull out. It's just not my go-to palette for colorful looks. Coming in at number 12 is another Juvia's Place palette, and I really love this palette. It is the Deuce palette by Juvia's Place. Again, I wanted to rank this a little bit higher, but I just have a lot of palettes that I really love. So the ones we're getting into from now on are ones that they all have a special place in my heart, but this is just one that I don't find myself reaching for all the time. The formula in here, as always with Juvia's Place, is fantastic. Look how pretty those are. Oh my gosh, if you're into pastels, you will love this palette. This pink is definitely very bright, very bold, very intense. I do love a good pop of magenta peeking out through my crease, and I love this matte brown. It is so silky and so richly pigmented. It's lovely. Sometimes I don't really think about this palette when I'm wanting something a little bit more pink and ethereal looking. There are definitely no duds in here as far as the formula goes. They are all formulated beautifully. They have great pigmentation. They blend easily. The shimmers are so easy to pack on your lid with a brush or with your finger. It's just not one I find myself reaching for as much as I think I probably should. Ranking at number 11 is another one that I love, and I'm probably going to say that at the beginning of every one of these last 12 or 15 eyeshadows, and it is the Through My Eyes palette by Colourpop. I love this palette. I feel like this palette did not get the hype that it deserved. I didn't feel like a lot of people really talked about this one when it was released. This is such a fun, semi-colorful palette. You do get some color in here, but honestly, if you take out the teals, if you take out even this kind of pink tone right here, you're left with a lot of neutrals in here that make beautiful neutral eye looks with just the right amount of color to them. But you also get some variety in here. The colors inside here just really inspire me. I love this burgundy in my crease. Honestly, this thing has been used a lot, but this is, look at the pigmentation on that. It is absolutely so rich and so dark. I love these pinks in here. These greens are so beautiful. Look at that matte green. Oh, that's so pretty. But look at that yellow. If you are into a sunflower yellow, this is a really beautiful one. Such a fun palette. If you like to dip your toes into color, this is one of my favorites from Colourpop for that. I feel like this one should have gotten a lot more love than it got, and even though it's ranked at number 11, I love this palette so much. Alright, we are down to the top 10. These are obviously the palettes that have a very special place in my heart, and coming in at number 10 is this one right here. This is the Profusion Sunkissed palette. So I picked this up kind of on a whim this fall at a local Walmart, and I have fallen in love with this palette. I've been a fan of Profusion's eyeshadow formula for a while. I love this one because this one gives you a lot of variety, but it also gives you a lot of neutrals. You have this whole row right here of beautiful matte neutral shades and then a lot of color sprinkled in, but none of the color is over the top in my opinion. I really like their eyeshadow formula. It's not the highest quality eyeshadow formula out there. I don't think this is as high quality as my high-end shadows, my Juvias Place, Colourpop even, but it is pretty darn good, especially for the price. This entire palette was under $15, which for the variety that you're getting in here is outstanding. There are a couple of pressed glitters in here, which I'm not a fan of, but because there's just so much variety in here and so much to pick from, I don't hold it against this one too much. It's just a very fun and inspiring palette. It's one of those palettes that I love to dip into when I'm really wanting to play. And I think if you're someone that likes the idea of color, but maybe you're a little bit afraid of it, and you certainly don't want to invest money into higher end eyeshadows that you may not use very often, this is a great place to start. I think they're easy to work with, and the price, it's fantastic. And coming in at number 9 is another palette that I absolutely love, and this one actually reminds me a lot of the Sunkissed palette and just my thoughts on the whole setup in general. This is the So Jaded palette by Colourpop. The reason this one ranks a little bit higher is because I just think Colourpop's formula is a little bit better than the Profusion formula. I also think the color story inside this one is even a little bit more interesting, and there's a couple of shades inside here that are absolute standouts. Let me just kind of swatch a couple of these shades for you guys. This blue right here is so pretty on the inner lid. You get some beautiful lid shades in here that are so pretty and fun to play with. Let's swatch some of these greens. Seriously, these are just, the formula on these are incredible. It does have the pressed glitters in here. I feel like this might even rank a little bit higher if these two shades right here were shimmers instead of pressed glitters. I think the color story of this one is just so fun and interesting. If you are into jewel tones when it comes to color and not bold, bright color, I feel like this one might be a little bit more bold, whereas this one is a little bit more kind of earthy and jewel toned. There's just so much variety in this palette. This is just such a fun and inspiring palette to play with. There's a handful of palettes that I'll gravitate towards when I want to play with color, and this is definitely going to be one of them. Ranked at number 8 is this one right here. This is the Tati Beauty Textured Neutrals palette. I have talked a lot about my mixed feelings on this palette, and I really do love this palette. I think the formula of this palette really is special. I've talked with you guys a lot about my thoughts on the glitters. I think they're beautiful. They're easy to work with. They're just not the type of thing I wear on my eyes on a daily basis, and that's part of the reason that this palette is ranking a little bit lower for how much I love the formula of this. However, I use this thing a lot, especially when I'm wanting to pull in maybe a deep rich matte brown for my lash line or as liner. If I'm really wanting to smoke out my crease, this is the one that I will pull in because I just think there's something extra rich and extra special about the formula of these shadows. I love the metallics in here. They look so beautiful and smoothing on the lid, which I know I've mentioned quite a few times for you guys. It's a really nice formula. I don't know, there's some things about this color setup I just feel like is a little bit redundant. I'm really excited to see what she comes out with next. I personally hope that she sticks with these 3 formulas and does just kind of a standard palette with a variety of different colors and tones, maybe throw in some taupes and some purples, maybe even a couple of greens. I think that would be amazing to see from her because I really do think her formula is amazing. Super easy to work with, but also extremely like rich and pigmented and intense. So I love this palette. I love having it in my collection collection. I just was hoping that this palette, when I heard the announcement of Tati's coming out with an eyeshadow palette, I kind of thought this was going to be the eyeshadow palette of the year for me, and I wish this was ranked a little bit higher, but because of those reasons I had to knock it down a few notches. But I'm not going to deny that this is a really great palette. I'm happy to have it, and I think the formula is worth it ranking a little bit higher than some of the other eyeshadow palettes that I also love. Coming in at the number 7 spot is the Persona Identity 2 palette. This palette, you guys might know how much I love Persona as a brand, especially their eyeshadow formula. It is outstanding. Her first palette, if you are into your neutrals, is such a beautiful palette. And this palette, when I first got it, it took me a little bit longer to fall in love with this palette because some of the tones in here are deeper than I anticipated they would be on my eyes. But as I've used it a little bit more and learned how to work with these darker colors on my eyes personally, you can get some amazing, beautiful looks out of this palette. This color right here, which is one of the colors that when I first got it, I thought it was kind of an odd choice to choose kind of a pinky toned satin for the lid, but this looks so beautiful on the inner corner or on the lid. There's something about that little bit of peach and pink in it that just adds an extra level of brightness to your eyes if you are into that kind of bright inner corner or inner lid look, which you might know that I am. This transition shade is perfect for me personally. Love that they included a matte ivory shade in here. And then of course the other colors are stunning as well. You get a beautiful basic bronze that's very nice and rich and deep if you like a deep rich bronze. This color right here is so pretty. It's like a rusty rose. I don't know how to explain it. It's just so beautiful. But I think especially where this palette shines is when you combine this palette with their other palette, you can get so many amazing and beautiful and interesting looks. And I just think her formula is absolutely exceptional. So I don't know if you guys can tell, but you can see that shimmer is just, it's so refined. It's not an overly textury shimmer. So again, I think this is a great palette if you are just wanting to create kind of a rich, slightly colorful look. This is such a great palette, and the formula is why it is ranked at number 7. Coming in at number 6 is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Sultry palette. Now I've heard from some of you guys saying that you think this is kind of a boring color story, and I can definitely see that. But this palette is like a variety of neutral eye looks glammed up. You just get such a variety of finishes in here. Even though at first glance they're all neutrals, they're all a little bit different. I love that you get this pop of coral in there if you want to throw some coral into a look. These silvers right here are so stunning. And of course these golds and kind of rosy shades and bronzes. This is one that I reach for when I'm wanting something that's not like, hey, look at this beautiful creative eye look that I did. If I just want my eyes to look pretty, this is the palette I will reach for 8 times out of 10. One of her best formulas. The shimmers inside here are consistently amazing, and the mattes are as amazing as her mattes always are, in my opinion. I think you can still find this on Anastasia's website, but if you can't find this, I have heard that the company, I think Colourpop Cosmetics, does a dupe for this palette. I'll find out and link it down below because I've heard really good things about that dupe. If you're interested in this color story but you can't get a hold of it anymore, I'm telling you guys, this is such a good palette. And it's not the color story of this palette that makes it special. It's the finishes inside here. They are just dynamite. All right, guys, we are into my top 5. And coming in at number 5 is the Juvia's Place Magic Mini palette. I tried this out at the beginning of this year. I want to say like January is when I tried out this palette, and it is amazing. This is another one of those palettes, kind of like the Through My Eyes palette, or the So Jaded palette, or the Sunkissed palette. When I want to play with color, this is one of the very first palettes I reach for, and has been pretty much this entire year. When I'm wanting something different, something creative, when I don't want to just throw a matte brown in my crease, maybe I want to throw a rich purple or a navy blue or this dark teal color that's almost a black with a little bit of teal in it. I mean, these colors are just so stunning, so unique, so beautiful. I also love the variety of lid shades you get in here. You get a nice neutral pink, this beautiful yellow, this kind of steely blue. Seriously, you can get some beautiful, colorful looks out of these that aren't like rainbow colors. We're not talking like a rainbow eye look, which I guess you probably could create a rainbow eye look with this palette, but I just love this palette for like that one special color that I want to reach for to make my eye look a little bit interesting or a little bit different. And honestly, I could sit and swatch and stare at this palette all day long. I just think it is so beautiful. A lot of people look at Juvia's Place eyeshadow palettes, and I can understand why they feel a little bit confused by them, because you look at this palette and you think, what? There's no like continuity between it, but that's kind of what I like about them, because they make you think and they make you be a little bit more creative, and I love the creative process of makeup, especially when I'm playing with color, and this palette absolutely inspires me. I absolutely love it. The formula is amazing. One of my absolute favorite Juvia's Place palettes. And if ever anyone asks me for a good option for a colorful palette, this is the one I will recommend 9 times out of 10. And as much as I do love to play with color and be creative with my makeup sometimes, more often than not, I want to just sit down and create something that's simple without having to think about it. And that's kind of the tagline, I feel like, of this palette. Make me look pretty without having to think. That is this palette. Down to my top 3 palettes from 2019, and ranked at number 3 is this one right here. This is the Natasha Denona Sunrise palette. This is such a beautiful, inspiring, fun palette. I really love this one. It's Natasha Denona, which means it is a little bit more expensive, but this is one of her cheapest palettes. $65, which I know is crazy, but considering that her other palettes are like $130+, I don't feel like that's a bad price, and I've always wanted to try out the Natasha Denona formula, so this was a great opportunity for me to do that this year, and I really enjoyed the color story of this palette. This is the palette that made me fall in love with yellow eyeshadow, and the yellows inside this palette, which I've accumulated quite a few since getting this one, but these yellows, specifically these two right here, my fingers, oh boy, they're a little bit stained, but these yellows right here are just special. Look at that. They're like wearable neon yellows. I don't know how to explain the color of these. They're just so stunning. I love these raspberry kind of berry tones in here. I love this color right here, which doesn't look that deep, but this does such a beautiful job of giving you just the right amount of depth in your outer corner or on your lash line, especially considering the colors that you're going for. I think when you're going with bolder color, something about putting a little bit less of an intense deep shadow on your crease makes those colors a little bit more wearable, if you will. Basically, it gives you depth without looking like super contrasty, which sometimes I like that look, but when you have a bold color on your lid or in your crease, I feel like that might be a little bit too much. So in that way, I think this is just a very well curated palette. If you are into kind of watermelon tones and peach tones, you would absolutely love this one. Her formula is really nice. I love her shimmers because they are definitely like mature friendly shimmers. They look very smooth and almost creamy like on the lids. They aren't as metallic and bold as say these type of shimmers would be, but I kind of like that sometimes. And I think a lot of people, especially when you're working with color, again, I think intensity is not always the best thing to go after, and this is just such a well done palette. I really enjoy this. This is one that every time I reach for this, I feel fancy and I feel like I'm having fun playing with my makeup. It's just such a fun palette, and you can create anywhere from a neutral look to a very bold and intense and colorful, but not over the top eye look with this thing. Love it. Love her formula. Such a good palette, and one of the ones I would miss the most if all of my palettes disappeared. But ranked at number 2 is a very small but powerful palette, and it's this one right here. This is the Huda Beauty Nude Light palette. I'm kind of surprised that I'm ranking this so highly. I mean, I love this palette, but I haven't had it for very long, but this is one that I've had a hard time putting down, and there are just so many things that I love about this palette. Number 1 being just my general love of these Obsessions palette is pretty deep. I love the size of these. I love the variety that you get in them, how compact they are, but you also get enough variety that you feel creative with them. They're travel friendly. The formula is fantastic. This kind of color story reminds me of the feel of the Sweet Talk palette and the Carly Bible palette, in that it's a little bit more pastel, a little bit soft, but the formula of these ones I feel like is a little bit extra special. Once again, this color right here is not overly deep, which I think is kind of a good thing. When you're going for a very soft look, again, you don't want to put something super intense and dark in your outer corner. Sometimes I think I want to do that, but honestly, when I just go with this kind of more medium toned matte brown in my outer crease, you still get definition there, but it's a lot more softer looking. It just gives you a little bit more of a feminine, natural kind of eye look. You don't look like you're Lady Gaga with this very intense, smoky outer corner, which is nothing against Lady Gaga. Sometimes I love that kind of look. I love a rich, smoky outer corner, but this palette has made me rethink when that is and isn't appropriate, like depending on what type of look I'm going for. And I think this is a palette that would look great on anyone with medium to fair skin. It's just so beautifully done. The variety inside here, the shimmers are so fantastic. This one in particular, I can't stop reaching for this shimmer and putting it on my eyelid. I'm sorry, there's like dark blue underneath there, but it's basically a pink that shifts, has a strong like gold and purple shift to it. It's just so interesting. And even these two shimmers right here, which I'll swatch for you here, have reflex in them that are not like what you see in the pan. So they just have a little bit more interest when you put them on your eyes. I love this. It's just such a powerful, tiny little palette. That's why I wanted to rank it number 2, because this is just one that I feel like is kind of like the Colourpop palette in that it's really easy to work with, kind of no fail, but it's a little bit more interesting and fun and creative than that one is. I love this thing. The packaging's amazing. This is one, again, that has a special place in my heart. If ever I'm traveling, this is probably one of the first ones that I will reach for. It's just so, so pretty. That leaves us with my #1 ranked palette from 2019. I have to tell you guys, I've known for the last almost 2 months that this was going to be crowned my #1 palette of the year, and it is the Anastasia Beverly Hills and Jackie Aina palette. This palette was curated just for me. This is everything that I love in a good eyeshadow palette is inside this palette. #1, it's ABH's formula, and I feel like it's their best formula. Everything in here is just formulated to perfection. The color story of this one is so me. You get basically 50% neutrals and 50% colors that can be worked into a neutral look. There's also some individual shades inside here that I just think are extra special. It's such a good palette. I just fell instantly in love with this palette. This shade right here, which is the shade Sponsored, I mean, look at that shade. It's like one of those matte club shades, but it's done right. Those shades often disappoint me, and this one is just done so well. I love this warm, almost purpley brown you get in here. This color, which is a beautiful kind of taupe, but it's a little bit deeper than your traditional kind of purpley taupe color, is so beautiful. This kind of greeny gold color is stunning. The color Zam is one of my favorite lid shades ever. It's like a champagne with a little bit of like a warm peachy gold to it. So stunning on the eyelids. And then you get this color Soleil, which is a little bit more of like a satiny shimmer that looks a little bit more smoothing on the eyelids if you're into that kind of thing. I could go on and on about every single shade inside here. The purples are beautiful. I'm actually wearing this palette on my eyes today. Let me just tell you guys kind of what I did. So I put a tiny bit of this color Ginger just above my transition area right there. And then on top of that, I took a mix of Big Wig, this purple, and Pinker, which is kind of the plum color. Mix those two together and lightly put them right in my crease right there, slightly above. Then I went in to the color Lituation, which is kind of the purpley taupe color, tapped on the outer half of my lid, and then on the inner half of my lid I went in with the color Soleil and then added a tiny bit of Zam on top of that. And I love this eye look. I think it's so pretty. I've never created an eye look with this palette that I wasn't just like floored by. Every time I use this, I'm wowed by how beautiful the look is, how simple it is to create. That's one of the things I love about Anastasia's formula the most. It's so easy to get a really stunning eye look without putting in a lot of time and effort because her shadows are so pigmented but also so blendable. I think it's very unfortunate that this is going to be a limited edition eyeshadow palette because I just think it is special. There's just something special about all of the colors. The way that this mixes finishes and neutrals and shimmers, but also gives you your basics. You've got your champagne, you've got your deep matte brown. I just think there's nothing that this palette can't do. It truly can do no wrong in my mind. If you happen to get a gift card for Christmas and you're asking me for one recommendation for an eyeshadow palette that I would recommend to go pick up after Christmas, this would be it. If you don't have this one, I just think it is so stunning. So yeah, throw the confetti in the air. This is officially the best palette in my opinion of the year. Absolutely love it. Could not live without this thing. Alright you guys, and with that, that is it for my 20 eyeshadow palettes from 2019 ranked. 20. That sounds so excessive to me, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful for you guys to hear my thoughts on all of these palettes, which ones I love the very most and why I love them. Let me know what you guys tried out and loved this last year. I would love to know your top 1 or your top 2 palettes that you tried out from 2019. Leave them in the comments below. Quick little reminder or announcement for those of you that are new. January on my channel, I'm doing a full month of nothing new. So basically all January long, we are focusing on the products that I have in my collection that I love, and I'm so excited for the videos I have coming your way for the month of January. I hope that if you are not yet subscribed to my channel that you will do that before you leave. But that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope that you guys have a great one, and I will see all of you in my next video. Bye. Palettes, which is for ugh. Oh, I forgot to take my watch off. Take my watch off. Don't like when my athletic watch is on. Ruins my outfit. It's Christmas break right now, and there is always a toilet flushing. There's always someone running upstairs. You're just gonna have to be okay with it because there's nothing I can do about it. I can't make my kids disappear. Just kidding. Hope that you get my humor. I do love my children. I gravitate. Oh, my kids will love that joke. This palette is so... Stop screaming, kids! My gosh! That's wanting to dip... Nice, Mandy. You hit yourself in the head with an eyeshadow palette in the last video that we did. We have all been waiting for.
Hi, Mommy.
What? Hello! All you do, you have breakfast on your face. What did you eat for breakfast? Did you eat your candy from your stocking? Yes. You've been eating candy. You've been eating candy? Yeah? What was your favorite toy from Christmas?
Paw Patrol toy.
Paw Patrol toy. Say bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.